Okay.
And yeah, you can just like do an introduction and then flow right into the questions.
Okay, sounds good. So, hi, Stacia. Thanks for joining us today. Really excited about the opportunity to interview you. So, just gonna go a little bit about the background of why we bringing you here today, and then introduce myself, and then give you the chance to introduce yourself, and then we'll just kick into the questions. So, yeah. So to celebrate Black Maternal Health Week, New Voices Community Organizing Team actually set up this opportunity to interview you with your experience as a foster parent. So we are having a specific interview today that just highlights that experience of foster parenting as it relates to Black maternal health and just another option for motherhood. So again, yeah, we know there's different kind of non-traditional modes of being a parent. And so really appreciate you for just taking the opportunity to speak on your unique experience. And yeah, so my name is Jada Thompson. I do use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the Integrated Voter Engagement Coordinator out of Philadelphia with New Voices. And yeah, I'll just pass it to you to give just a quick little brief introduction before we get into the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jada. So most of you know me. My name is Sasha Elmore. My pronouns are she, her, queen. I'm the community organizing and engagement man with New Voices for Reproductive Justice. But also, when I entered this work, I was fostering two children. I was officially considered a resource parent, and I just like stumbled into the reproductive justice work. And in that time, I have had like many transitions with my phone, my home, my family, my relationships, and I've always felt like non-traditional parenting is an important part of the Black maternal health conversation, and one that is often left out of the conversation because the concentration is often on like hospitals and healthcare providers and how you're treated in the waiting room and in the delivery space, but often miss the mark when like addressing other forms of parenting, and particularly when a person has not birthed a child. So I'm hoping that through my story and experience, we can empower people who are non-traditional parents or parent in other ways. A lot of folks have experiences with, raising their baby cousins or even their siblings, which is known as like kinship care in a more official way. And I just happened to take the journey of foster parenting as a way of building my family.
Yeah, thank you so much for just giving that background on exactly. There's different ways and different opportunities to come into parenting. So again, I'm really excited to hear about you today, and thank you for, taking the time to speak on your unique experience. So I'll just kick it off by asking, what inspired you to become a foster parent, and how has your journey shaped your perspective on community organizing?
Yeah, thanks for this question, Jada. So I have known other folks who have gone through this process, and they always talk about how difficult it is, how the system sucks. But one thing that sticks with me is a particular couple that I knew or were acquaintances with said, if you ever have had it in your heart to do it, you just do it, because it makes that much of a difference to the child who needs that kind of support. So even with all the things that I've been through with navigating the system and building my family and experiencing parenting for the first time, I still think that it was a completely worth it experience. And I was able to provide those children with an exposure to Blackness and culture and organizing that they may not have otherwise had. My journey into organizing and reproductive justice actually came in the midst of my parenting journey. The children came to me in 2018, and I started with New Voices in 2020, just, following my own passion and lived experience as a Black woman. And so everything that I did that I was able to bring them along with me, they were with me. Every Saturday, we were at the community healing garden handing out food. When it was time to, register people to vote, and I was in the streets tabling, they were with me handing out flyers and swag. So I really believe that I provided them that grounding in how important it is to touch community, and also, show them that, you know, you may be in a position that is difficult for you or hard for you as a person, who is marginalized in the ways that they experience or understand that at their level. But there's always something that you can do to give back and to help. And so, in my journey of learning about organizing and reproductive justice, I learned that me as a Black person and as a queer person, as a woman, raising these children in a non-traditional way was very much in alignment with the work that I was now doing as a reproductive justice advocate.
Yeah, for sure. You really speak to the interconnectedness of that opportunity and how it relates to community and the work that we do here at New Voices. So, yeah, thank you so much for speaking on that. That kind of relates to the next question, which is how did your background in organizing inform the way you navigated the foster care system?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I didn't realize that I had a background in organizing until I started organizing. I guess at the career level or the job level, right? I came in as an official organizer late in 2020, just before the presidential election. And I didn't know that I had so much to learn about what organizing was, but also learn about what I have done throughout my life that encompassed organizing. I've always been a gatherer of folks. I've always connected people to help and resources. And I've always had an open door policy in my own home if community members, and particularly members of the Philadelphia Black and queer community, needed food or someplace to stay and lay their head or some shoulder to cry on. I was that like community auntie before my auntie years, right? So those are the ways that I have come to understand that already embodied organizing. And then coming into this space with New Voices helped give some form and fashion to the ways that I organize. And so the things that I've been able to learn in this journey have been really impactful, but also in a way, I think the thing that has impacted me the most is the way that I learned to advocate for myself. I was very much in in a space that was not necessarily designed to see me succeed as a parent. They tell you that as a foster parent, you do not have rights, and all of the decisions that are being made are in the best interest of the child. And so I'm like, hey, I'm team best interest of the child, but I'm also a person now navigating this experience that has very real feelings and attachments to this work. So even though it was familial and it was hard work, it also was very hard work. And the system definitely does not make it easy for you to be successful, to get the resources that you need. I always say that I'm glad I had some wherewithal about myself to understand, the loops and the hurdles and just the fortitude to get through those things.
Yeah, for sure. And that's such an amazing story of self that you just kind of laid out as to your journey through organizing, but then, what led you to as a foster parent. And that kind of perfectly aligns with the next question, which is you said there were unexpected challenges in the application process that did disproportionately impact Black and Brown families. So, can you just speak to that a little bit more and just some of those, just again, unexpected challenges that you may have had?
Yeah, for me in the application process, I don't know if I would name it so much as a challenge, but I could definitely see how some parts of the process could be a barrier. There are, of course, multiple trainings that you have to attend, and you have to attend them, in person, on site at the foster care center. So that makes me think about how accessible, that is for folks who aren't necessarily mobile. You have to have interviews about your own like personal experience and upbringing that may or may not impact whether or not you get a child placed in your home. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that the departments that facilitate the processing of your application or certification as a foster parent, to the point that a child is actually placed in your home often don't talk to each other. Like you are the glue that is holding this process together. So it's very much up to you. And that's why I say, thank goodness I had the wherewithal and some fortitude to follow this process through, because I was the one who was constantly following up. I was the one making sure that each, entity received my documents because someone didn't pass along a file or a document that they were supposed to pass along. I was the one, scheduling appointments and scheduling my own trainings, basically. So it was because I had that passion and this is something that I wanted to do and I saw as a vehicle to build my family that I, moved forward with, I'm going to do these things. Even when it came down to the children coming out of emergency placement, I was the one to go pick them up. That was probably something that should have never happened. It was a very like difficult transition for children who was just entering the child protective services for the very first time. Very jarring for them to be in one placement, an emergency placement for 2 weeks, and now having me as a complete stranger in their more permanent placement to come pick them up. They were very confused about what was happening. And then you find out the things that were supposed to happen and get done while they were in emergency placement didn't happen. The I fostered as siblings, a brother and a sister. The younger one, who was the boy, he had a whole bags full of clothes. The girl came with nothing. So it's very it can be very like insightful, and I'll just say like you kick it into high gear. Like how do I get these children on the page that they need to be? They came a few days before school started in my district. I had to get them enrolled into school. I later found out that one of them didn't even finish kindergarten. So that's another barrier, right? So all these like mishaps, missed connections in communication between the different entities. And if I wasn't the person staying on top of it, and like being the glue in this puzzle, then a lot of things would have fallen apart at the seams and at the detriment of these two children.
For sure. And yeah, thank you for being so persistent, because again, you may not have been able to anticipate those challenges, but we're luckily able to navigate them. And people are not typically aware of these challenges either. So thank you again for being persistent, but also speaking on these issues. And it leads me to my next question, which is what were some of the biggest hurdles that you faced when trying to access those resources for your foster children?
Yeah, so one of the biggest hurdles that caused a lot of frustration is when my youngest child was experiencing some behavioral difficulties. And, I reached out for assistance, and it was really downplayed. So I started my communication with the foster care agency about these differences that I was seeing in his behavior. And it was an escalation of more dangerous behavior, right? Like, I don't have eyes in the back of my head. I can, I physically cannot watch him 24/7. And if something happens to him while he is legally in my care, that's going to be, a detriment to me. And so I think in reaching out and explaining this, it was really downplayed. It was like, oh, Miss Elmore, like, you're stressed out, you just need a break. We'll try to find some respite care for you. And I just was trying to explain that it was much more than respite care. And initially I was like, maybe I do need a break. And maybe that's the time we take to like really figure this thing out. Keep in mind too, like we're in the midst of COVID. A lot of people were not taking additional people, into their home. So it was really difficult to secure respite care for them during that time. And so in the time that, they're looking at respite care, his, behaviors are ticking up. So I'm like, hey, like it's getting a little dangerous. you know, I started, documenting every little thing that he did, like no matter how minute or how grand it was. And I was being in communication with the agency. And then later, those things were actually used against me. They were saying that, like, I was making a big deal out of these behaviors that if I couldn't handle him, how am I going to move into an adoption process with him? And I'm like, well, the point is, like, I have y'all here now as my support, right? And I'm reaching out for support. And as someone who had a career in behaviorism, I understood, that these more active behaviors were a sign of communication of things that he did not have words for, right? And as a parent, it was frustrating to not know what those things were. And so I definitely needed a different level of support that just was not there, and was really disappointing the ways that they really turned it around on me and even tried to criminalize me and accuse me of certain things that were impacting his behavior because they didn't want to take responsibility for not, filling in and finding the resources in time. And it escalated to a point, unfortunately, where he had to be removed from our home, which also affected the placement of his sister. And so that's how the kids actually ended up transitioning from my home. And in all of these things, we want to keep the children together. If he leaves, she also has to leave because, I was really working with them to continue to support and also to continue to keep them together for me to later find out that when they were placed together, they were separated because those behaviors continued and he had to be placed in another home. So as far as I know, they are still, separated. I don't have a direct contact with them anymore. It's been a few years since they transitioned from my home, but I just think it's unfortunate that we could have done something at the ground level when we initially noticed these behaviors, and instead of acting upon it and even being proactive, it lingered and not to the best interest of the child, as they like to say that they work toward.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And thank you for speaking on that experience with those two siblings. And honestly, as you were speaking, it reminded me about what a lot of Black mothers experience, right? That we don't get the resources that we need. Folks think that we're much stronger than what we really are. And it's just unfortunate that again, even in this experience, you had a similar experience where they didn't provide you with the resources that you need. And it begs the question, are these Black kids getting the resources, or are they in the best interest of heart? So yeah, thank you for that. And it kind of makes me wonder, have you noticed disparities in foster parents of color receiving support compared to their white counterparts?
This is a great question. And I think I'm going to answer this in a more direct way, indirect way, because there isn't anything that I observed directly. But I want to bring attention to a documentary that I watched about a white same-sex couple um, on the other side of the country. I want to say they were like in Texas or Colorado, California, somewhere on in that South, Wisconsin, somewhere in that area, who adopted, fostered, and then moved to adoption of these three children of color, um, who, if you look into the backstory, was just they did not have to be, they were already with a kinship care provider. So they were with a family member, and because the mother visited the home while that family member was out, the system just removed those children from the home. Well, they placed them with this white couple. So that's number one. Sometimes our parents are just and I mean by our Black people are criminalized in ways that just does not make sense, that especially to us in our culture, because of our familial nature, right? And so even if that woman did let the birth parent visit, that's not necessarily a reason to have the children removed from the home. Yes, but nonetheless, these children were removed from the home, and now they're in the care of this same-sex white couple, who later was found to be abusing these children and withholding these food. But no, they didn't get removed from the home. Those children did not get removed from the home even after finding out that they were doing these things. There was a court proceeding, there was like some training, but the children were able to stay. Well, though that couple then moved to another state. So that's another um, disconnection in this country. There's no state to state system when it comes to child protective services. There's no federal child protective services. So what happens in one state does not translate to another state if there's no kind of federal conviction. You submit those fingerprints and that clearance come back according to your state, and that's it. And they were able to adopt three more children, Black children, and the same thing occurred. And one of the children finally like broke free and was able to tell a neighbor that they weren't being fed. They were being withheld, from food, that the younger children were being abused. And by the time the neighbors were calling CPS, this couple has now packed up all the children, moved out of their home, and ultimately the results were fatal for the entire family. So it's just unfortunate because the level of privilege and trust that is put into our white counterparts are is often unwarranted. And Black people, and particularly Black women, are criminalized and their families are torn apart and broken. Can we say that those children would have had the same demise if they would have just stayed with their aunt or their grandmother, right? But because you think that there is a level of privilege that this white family, this white couple can provide, you place it with them. And then when it is founded that they are not treating the children fairly, they are not criminalized or receive any punitive action for it. So that's one example that I can give about what the disparity is. And I know that that's a movie, but that happened, that was a documentary, but it happened in real life. And there's stories like that that happen all across our nation and even right here in our city. I can go on and on about white people and adoption and how adoption and foster care is related to chattel slavery, but I don't know if we got that kind of time. So I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And like you said, it's unfortunate, right? Because you're seeking parenthood. There's multiple ways and different reasons why folks are seeking that, but you don't know that you may be met with those stereotypes and that unfortunate marginalization. So, yeah, thank you so much for speaking on that. And it kind of makes me think that given what you said about your experience and some of those implicit biases that come with, wanting to be a prospective foster parent, what advice could you give to those who may be feeling overwhelmed, and especially people of color operating this system?
Yeah, the first piece of advice is stay the course. Like in your heart why you are doing this. Some people do this for a check. God bless those people because what it costs to raise a child versus what they actually give you. If you're doing it for a check, God bless you. But if you're doing it because your heart says to do it, then absolutely follow through with it. The other piece is trust yourself. If you are experiencing something that does not feel right or normal to you, speak up about it, continue to advocate for yourself, run it all the way to the top. Um, and thirdly, I would definitely say trust your village, tap into your village. I know some days I would have completely lost my mind if I did not have the village that I have. And there are times now looking back that I took on and tried to handle really big mountains by myself, and I should have tapped into community. So that's a top 3, you know, trust yourself, um, tap into community, and I forget the first thing I said, but we can run it back.
Yeah, thank you. You said stay the course. Stay the
Stay the
course.
course. There we
Yeah.
go. Yes.
Thank you so much. And I guess that again leads me to my next question, because you talk a lot about resources and just kind of again that accessibility. And so how can grassroots movements and community organizations support foster parents beyond what the system provides?
Yeah. Initially, I think about mutual aid. I think even as someone who holds a certain level of privilege and again, wherewithal, there were times where I just needed stuff, you know, like tangible things. I took advantage of food programs to make sure the kids had lunch and snacks in between our meals. As a foster parent, you're not eligible for food stamps. So I'm a person who went from, just caring for myself to now making sure that 3 human beings, including myself, survive, which was a different experience. And so sometimes those like systemic resources are not there for you because it's like, well, we giving you a check. You know what I mean? So like use that check and make sure you take care of the things that you need to take care of. And also like especially during a time like now and inflation is hitting everybody's pockets, right? How are you supporting people that are taking care of a child or multiple children, um, and all those things, and have these conversations. Like I said, foster parents, resource parents, kinship care folks are often left out of the conversation when we're talking about parenting, and particularly Black maternal health, where the focus is on the womb, right? But there's a lot of people who may not have the physical ability to birth a child. Does that make that person less of a parent? And so I think this is a time where those folks should also be centered and considered when talking about building families. Um, so those would be my top ideas. Like, what aid can you provide? What relief can you provide to someone, and particularly Black women who are often the, caretakers and heads of households in our communities, right? And often doing it on their own. I'm someone who, at the time, I was seeking to foster children, was not even in a committed relationship, right? And I was also in a point in my life where I said, if that doesn't happen for me, does that mean I will never experience motherhood? Am I going to wait in my entire life to have a partner to build a family with? And thank goodness I'm at the point where I have found a partner and someone I can build my family with. But at that time, I didn't know this moment was going to occur, right? And so I was in the place of like, I want to build my family. And I did that as a single person. And even later in that experience, when I did partner with someone, they were not supportive. So that goes back to that, making sure that you have the support around you to help you raise your family in a safe and sustainable way.
Yeah, it kind of just touches on that point of that it does take a village, and community organizations and these groups, should be aware of opportunities to help out foster parents. So thank you so much. And can you actually just speak on how these issues around foster parenting actually connect back to reproductive justice, housing insecurity, and economic inequality?
Yeah. So the connection to reproductive justice is we as women, as Black women, as queer folks have a right to say how we want to build our family, right? And how we raise that family and keep that family in a safe and sustainable manner and community. And so for me, that's the direct connection. This was, I made this decision, like I said, before I even came to New Voices and before I really even understood what reproductive justice is, right? And then for me to come here and understand, like, oh, I'm living, breathing, walking, moving, um, in reproductive justice. Me being able to have this experience with these children is reproductive justice. The way I, raise them and provide for them and work and live and even maintain, relationships is reproductive justice. Um, and so I think of these other pieces, housing insecurity, economic inequality, as parts of, this journey to reproductive justice. Reproductive justice looks like um, safe, sustainable, and appropriate housing for everyone, right? Economic justice looks like equitable pay for women and particularly Black women, for queer folks, for trans folks, right? And so that's how those things intersect with reproductive justice. And honestly, if parents and Black moms and other Black birthing people had the resources that they needed in the first place, a lot of these children would not end up in foster care. A lot of times, um, we are criminalized for not having. It's the punishment for being poor, right? So instead of like, how can we get this person in a home that is safe and appropriate, is, oh, you can't take care of your kids because you got them in this rundown house, right? So let's just think about, this in a holistic manner. We are criminalized for not having, for not being able to touch the hem of some resources, or having the resources to fix up our homes, or live in somewhere that is safe, or be in a position to get a better job or to earn more money. All of these things are directly connected to reproductive justice, and I wholeheartedly agree that, if even the situation that I was in, I have empathy for that birth mother. I wholeheartedly believe that if she had access to mental health resources, that her children would not have been taken away, and they would not have been in my care. And I could say that as a foster parent, right? As someone who loved them and loves them still, right? And very much wishes that they were in my life. I don't wish ill on their birth mother, because I understand that if she had the resources that she needed, these children likely would not have been in the position that they were in, and neither was she.
For sure, yeah. And that just makes me think of, again, resources and accessibility, right? Because you make a great point as far as like housing. What are like government entities doing to support foster parents through maybe some housing choice vouchers and things like that? And it kind of makes you think, what policies or systemic changes would do you think would make fostering or non-traditional parenting options more accessible and equitable for Black families?
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, foster parents are people, right? We people just like everybody else. We're just people who decided that we have the capacity to take care of children that we didn't birth. Okay. So as people, we still need things. And as people who are raising children that we did not birth, we especially need things. One thing that um I could say, because what rings true for me, or what I had come to understand in this process, and what was actually said to me, is that foster parents do not have rights. You don't have the right to say, I want to keep these children. You don't have the the right to say, I can do better, or I can make sure that they have. If the system says it's time for them to go, it's time for them to go. Um, and that's the part that makes it like more difficult to advocate for yourself. um, that was the difficulty in advocating for myself in this situation. I very much understood that the system works in the best interest of the child and wants to keep families together. And I had that understanding moving into this process. And then as my family was falling apart, my thought was, who's advocating for me? Who's advocating for my family, right? And so I think that is a question for people who have the heart to do this work, um, and have the heart to really share this level of love. Is a labor of love, and it's hard work, right? And I know that's a hard thing um to ascertain or to determine, if you're on the outside looking in, because people can pretend, right? And ask yourself, like, how do children end up in these like awful, fostering experiences, when there are people out here who actually want this, who actually want to be parents, who actually want to provide, who have the resources to give. On paper, I'm a model parent, right? And then I like to say stuff just got crazy and haywire, and then immediately I was put in a bucket of criminalization. Immediately. Right? And so what does it look like to actually work with people who want to do this work? Because it is a work, right? There's a part there that's passion, but there's another part that's work. And some people genuinely have the heart for it. How do you identify those people and cultivate the love and passion that they have to make sure that our children, these Black children, and these children of color that make up the a large percentage of this foster care system. We want to make sure that they have what they need. And there's Black people out here, parents out here who want to do that work. How are we supporting them to do it?
For sure. Yeah, it kind of goes back to some of your advice points of like really making your needs known and advocating so that the experience of kind of like foster parents is centered for representatives, for community organizations. So like you said, really foster the needs of people who want to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for speaking on that. And kind of leads me to my last question for you, which is what do you wish more people understood about the realities of being a foster parent?
Yeah. Um, that is not much different. Right? The only difference is they didn't pass through my body. But I don't love them any differently. I don't treat them any differently. Anybody who knows me knows that I treated these children as if they came from my own womb. Um, and so I think that there are a lot of assumptions and misconceptions about why foster parents decide to be foster parents. And sometimes it's just about taking time to learn that story. Like I said, if they do it for a check, God bless them. Um, but some people out here want to make sure that their cousin don't end up in the system, or want to make sure they baby sister don't end up in strangers' hands, right? Or like me, is a Black queer woman who was ready to build her family and felt like I had something to offer. So take time to learn the stories and just understand why people choose to be foster parents, to be resource parents, to give so much of themselves. It's no secret that this is the story of Black women, right? We've been taught to um, sacrifice and be satisfied with the leftovers. Um, and so I will say, as someone who is fostered, or to really to anyone who is parented, there is no greater sacrifice um, than being a parent, than giving so much of yourself just to ensure the survival of a whole nother being. Um, so I think that's what I wish that more people understood, that foster parents have a story and you should get the take the time to get to know it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Seisha. I know me personally, I have a completely different perspective on foster parenting after our conversation. And I do hope others watching can also understand that, again, there's different experiences for Black foster parents. And, it's again, like you said, it's just another non-traditional way of approaching parenthood. And, some of those challenges that you spoke on today, I'm sure will help a lot of folks who are interested in this process as well. So, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. And I just want to say one last thing. So I actually, for those of y'all who don't know, I'm also an artist. But I actually wrote a book of poetry, a chapbook about my parenting experience. It's called For the Moments the Universe Granted Me Motherhood, a foster parent's annals. And this picture here is actually something that I painted, but it's a representation of what my family was like. And I would like to share a poem from here before we go. And it's called They Tell Us. They tell us we're not supposed to get attached, that the babies we serve, we didn't birth, so there's no worth in fighting for them. They tell us it's in the best interest of the child. You're just part of the team, so take this on the chin. Our feelings get lost in political and systemic sauce, and the children get lost in the system. And I want to believe wherever they are, I, is the best place for them. That someone could possibly love them more than I have for the last 3 years. That the tears I allowed to flow for the last 36 months is worth the way my heart has broken for children I didn't give birth to. This is worse than that time I caught so and so cheating, or the time my mom was diagnosed with cancer because I knew God had her back, or the time 2 days before 2020 we almost lost our lives on the turnpike. This hurt bleeds from the inside out. And I'm scared to ask God what this is about, what the meaning behind all of this is. What is the greater good? Because I'm scared God will tell me the best thing for them isn't me. It would just confirm all of the things that the system wants me to believe about myself. All the things that I don't think are true, all the things that make me think I'm crazy, that I am undeserving of having a family of my own, that it's impossible for me to experience love at this level that didn't come from my womb, that I don't know how to be a parent, that I'm too strict, that I can't protect them from stereotypes, that I don't know what's best for my kids. But we're not supposed to get attached. The babies we serve, we didn't birth, so there's no worth in fighting for them. It's in the best interest of the child, and I'm just part of the team. You're supposed to be able to disconnect and move on to the next. Forget that you ever loved at this level, even though they didn't come from your womb. And so I wanted to share that because I feel like it embodies this experience that I had with very much wanting to be a good parent. And there were so many barriers to how that did and did not manifest. So yeah. And there are other parts of the journey that was like very joyful, which is also in here. And I do count it all joy. It's an experience that I'm deeply grateful for. And when I have the opportunity to be a parent again, I will be more prepared.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking on that, Stacia. I'm trying not to get emotional from your
No.
story. Um, I just think that it was such a powerful piece that you spoke on in that poem of like almost believing in those like that narrative, that they
Yeah,
projected onto you, right? So I just love that, like you said, you were able to count it all as joy and now contribute, that experience to this larger conversation around foster parenting. So thank you
yeah.
again for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jada. And I'm so glad that you were able to interview me when I was telling the organizing team, like, oh, I had this experience and I wanted foster care to be part of the conversation. They were like, why we just don't interview you? So thank you for stepping in and being the other side of this. Usually I would be the person interviewing someone. So it feels different to be on this side, but I'm glad that you held this space with care and asked some questions to really dig into this story and this experience. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.